So this is like the core, which is open source, but the products themselves aren't exactly open. So for them, trying to develop Mono is a way of trying to sell something that's not free. And this is what basically defines very often the notion of open core, which is a very dirty word if you're like in the free open source community, because it's kind of like trying to merge or to fake or to market yourself as open, when in fact all you do is you try to encourage people to buy your proprietary software. So that's the thing with Mono. I don't have much love for this thing. I've always been very suspicious of that.
Well, moving on just to a few other little snippets of news. Which one shall I choose first? Probably the best one. Yep, this is interesting. It's an IP address is not a person. This is an article from Torrent Freak, and it's detailing a district court judge, Harold Baker, I believe, who has decided that an IP address does not equal a person in respect of a subpoena to an ISP for alleged copyright infringers, which is very, very interesting because it's something that certainly anybody in the tech community or anybody with an interest in copyright/tech issues has been saying for a long time, that an IP address does not necessarily equal the person who pays the bill for the subscription. So that's a bit of encouraging news, certainly, and it looks to me, from if this sets a precedent, that the speculative invoicing scheme in America certainly will be a thing of the past. So that's an encouraging bit of news, and that's over on Torrent Freak. I recommend you go and have a look at that. Giga News is being sued, apparently. Giga News is a Usenet provider, and anybody who's been reading my blog, and I think listening to this show, I can't remember how long ago, but I'm sure we've had conversations before about how the copyright trolls and the revenue protection squad, for want of a better word, will be coming after Usenet, since BitTorrent seems to attract a lot of them as well. So that's quite interesting. That's another little article that caught my eye on Torrent Freak. If you'll allow me, I've got another little bit of news, Roy, and that was something I covered on my site, and it was a nice little game called Greedy Car Thieves that anybody that has listened to the show or read my site will know I'm a bit of a retro gaming fan, and that's mainly because my most experience with computing was in the days of the 8 and 16-bit machines. So I sort of look with happy memories back at those times and happier computing times. So when something like Greedy Car Thieves, which is a bit of a naff title for a game, I think, comes along, it sort of catches my eye because it's based very loosely on the original Grand Theft Auto series. Long before Grand Theft Auto franchise became this ultra-violent and, in my opinion, vulgar product it is today, it was quite a nice little top-down racer with a little bit of tongue-in-cheek type violence, but in a very tame sort of way. And Greedy Car Thieves is aiming to emulate that experience somewhat. And the good news is that they're releasing it for Linux as well. They've got 64-bit and both 64 and 32-bit versions. It's currently only in a beta. Very nice little playable game. You can't do a lot with it at the moment, obviously, because it's still going through its testing stage, and there's a big question mark over how it's going to be distributed, under what sort of license, and how much, etc. And but it's looking very promising, and it does bring up a big point here, because you often hear people talking about Linux and how it's got a 0.7% market share, which many people dispute, myself included. But regardless of what the market share of Linux is, if we look at things like the Humble Indie Bundle, and the amount of payments that they received, I'm looking at the pie chart now from the payments received from the Humble Indie Bundle, and it has a quarter of all the payments being Linux users. In fact, it's more so than the Mac version of the software. And also, the Linux users were apparently the most generous when asked to give as much as they wanted to give for the package. Linux users, on average, paid more money and were willing to pay more. So it certainly shows, when you add that and Android into the equation, it certainly shows that there's a market out there for Linux platform, and there's certainly people willing to pay for quality products. So that was a bit encouraging to see that. Again, Minecraft is another example, not specifically for Linux. It's a Java game, which I've praised far too much because I'm addicted to it currently. But again, it shows that there are people willing to pay for quality products. And if people are willing to cater for the Linux platform, they find people are not only very generous and wanting to pay for it, but there is a great demand for them. So that's an encouraging sign. I think once I don't want to quote the Steve Ballmer developers, but I think once developers do see that the myths and FUD around Linux not being profitable or Linux not being a viable platform to deploy your product on, I think it's a good thing. And I think while some people have mixed views about proprietary software, I think a mishmash of proprietary and free and open source software is fine, as long as that's on you've chosen that software in a position of choice and not being coerced or locked into a certain route. And certainly in the gaming market, I think personally that there is no particular harm in having proprietary products. You might disagree with me, Roy, but
I think there is this stereotype of me being an FSF type, where a person who's strongly against proprietary software obviously favor free software for all sorts of reasons, technical reasons too. I had experiences where I used like a proprietary piece of software and something breaks. What can I do about it? Well, I probably could contact the company if I even find an address to send this to, and hope to pay for the next release just so that I have the bug fixed. So yeah, it's the same arguments. We could do a whole show about why proprietary software is a bit of an issue. I mean, I actually have to use one these days. It's something to do with work but, you know, and I had some issues with, like, crashes, for example, with executables, crashing, and basically the whole session breaks because of that. I've had things like that. It's really hard to debug these things. Eventually I found the issue. It took me several hours to find out. And this is the type of experience where I just thought, well, if it was open source, could at least see what's going on inside. Instead, it just gives me a segmentation fault, and I have no access to the source code, so it's not very helpful.
To be fair, conversely, I mean, if we were to look, and like Roy says, it's probably best for another show in itself. I mean, myself and Roy have never actually sat down and said, right, I think this, and he thinks that. We've never compared really our views. When discussions come up and we've got disagreements, we'd obviously have the debate, but we've never actually sat down and made a long list of things that Roy agrees with and I disagree with, or vice versa. But I think certainly with proprietary, when you look at gaming, and that is, I am a strong advocate, advocate's maybe a wrong word, I would support proprietary gaming. I don't think there's any sort of harm in offering a game or an entertainment package as proprietary. It's very different to a utility, for example, like Microsoft Word or LibreOffice or something like that, where people are performing a task which is part of their daily life, part of their daily routine. With a game, it tends to be play until completion, and in a couple of years' time, it's put in a cupboard somewhere and forgotten about. But I mean, one thing you can say about proprietary, the updates for for bugs and things, whilst tend to be few and far between in my experience. Proprietary software does cater for that as well. I don't think gamers are missing out by games not being open source as a rule. Just looking towards the PlayStation 3, for example, you can get the latest game, and by the time you've had it a week, you've probably had about 6 or 7 updates from the company concerned, just in relation to bugs that users have found. I know it's slightly different for the PlayStation 3 platform, because it only has one set of hardware, and it's not working for a PC which can have an infinite amount of different combinations. But I do think there's a place for proprietary gaming, definitely. But like I say, we'll shift on very quickly from that, because that'll probably take up a whole show.
Reminds me of a bit of a joke though about, did you hear about the second breaking into Sony's database?
I'm just actually coming on to this.
There's actually a bit of a joke about Bin Laden, basically. He gave his real address to the PlayStation Network thing. That's,
is it? It's a joke, right?
Yeah, several jokes like that. Actually, some people show you the games that are basically skins or modes for first-player kind of shooter games that are themed towards fighting against the Americans and kind of Arabic games, that thing. But anyway,
I was just going to bring up very quickly about the latest article on Sony and this fiasco that's turned out to be the bringing down of the PlayStation Network. I mean, for me, to be fair, I didn't particularly miss the PlayStation Network. I had my Minecraft addiction over the last few weeks, but also I had a lot of other things to do. So to be fair to Sony, I probably wouldn't have gone on the network even if it had been up and running. And the only reason I knew it was down, obviously, is because of the publicity it's received on Identica and Twitter and around the web. But there's a very bizarre little article that's just come out today in regards to Sony, and they've been investigating the hacks which obviously brought down the server and allegedly taken credit card details, then they didn't take credit card details. Now it appears that they might have taken credit card details, but they're from 2007. And when you read all these press releases, I'm at 6s and 7s as to what exactly has been taken and what hasn't. It's, I just can't get my head around it. But putting that aside, it seems that Sony are seeming to now be looking